light. Okay. Yes, now it is. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Poetry at Midday. This is always happening on the last Wednesday of the month at midday. And it is really a great pleasure to have Susan Hoy with us again. We missed you, Susan, last month, but we had a very interesting also session, and we missed your music and your readings, and we are very happy to have you back with us. So the screen is yours, Susan.
Great, thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be back with you all. I spent a couple of weeks in Ireland, and it was actually interesting at home to see how vibrant and how aware everybody is of literature and poetry especially. And during April, while I was actually in Ireland, there was the Poetry Day Ireland, celebrated on the 28th of April. So I just thought I'd bring you some of the poems that were shared through Poetry Ireland. We've got a lot of new poets that I'm going to introduce you to, maybe ones you haven't heard of before. Mm-hmm. Every year there's a theme, and this year the theme was "It's Written in the Stars," which is a sort of reflection on the way we think of fate, on what we think of our future, and of course the superstitions and ideas that surround that concept of what's going to happen in our futures. There were lots of events happening in Ireland which connected people through poetry. We had celebrities reading their favourite poems online, and for the first time in 2 years at live events, which was lovely. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to anything. I was looking after my mom, who was unwell at the time, and of course, thinking about this, one of our greatest superstitions in Ireland is the banshee. If you haven't heard of the banshee is the predictor of death. It was thought that if somebody is about to enter a situation where they're unlikely to come out alive, she would warn the family and the neighbours by screaming or wailing, especially at night. And then it was a prediction of death. My granny, she firmly believed in the banshee, and told me as a young girl many stories of people who had heard the banshee and then somebody in their family had died. So it wasn't a good thing to hear the wail of the banshee. Luckily for me, I didn't hear any banshees wailing while I was at home, and I was able to come back to Brazil happy in the knowledge that my mum was doing much better. Irish people have always been interested in fate and in predicting the future. And, there was a tradition of reading tea leaves, holding a needle over a pregnant woman's stomach to predict if the needle starts making circles, you're going to have a girl. And if it starts going back and forth, you're going to have a boy. And I suppose other signs, like signs of the future, like the weather, signs from the sky and the land. A red sky at night is a predictor of a good day the next day. If you drop a piece of cutlery, if you drop a knife, a man will visit. It's a fork. If it's a fork, it's going to be a woman visitor, or a spoon, it will be a kid that will pop in. If you see a robin on your windowsill, that's not a good sign. And doves are good. They're signs of hope and life, but magpies, well, magpies, we could spend a whole session talking about magpies in Ireland. There's an old saying, if you see one magpie, it's for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. So it depends on the number of magpies you see. And the tradition is, if you see one magpie on its own, you must salute it. and say, good day, magpie, in order to fend off any bad luck that you might have. I know every culture has their own superstitions, but of course, William Butler Yeats, that most famous of Irish poets, recognized that the Irish were more superstitious than other races. And he wrote, "For everyone is a visionary if you scratch him deep enough. But the Celt, unlike any other, is a visionary without scratching." So today I'm going to share some poems on this theme. It's written in the stars, and I hope you enjoy them. As usual, I'm going to start off with William Butler Yeats with his poem, "An Irishman Foresees His Death." I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those that I fight, I do not hate. Those that I guard, I do not love. My country is Kiltartan cross. My countrymen, Kiltartans poor. No likely end could bring them loss or leave them happier than before. Nor law, nor duty bade me fight, nor public men, nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. I balanced all, brought all to mind. The years to come seemed waste of breath, a waste of breath the years behind, in balance with this life, this death. The next poem is a very interesting poem. It's written by Dura Grifa, who is an award-winning and highly acclaimed poet from County Clare. Well, she was born in Galway, but she grew up in Clare, and now actually she lives in Cork in Ireland. She's a bilingual writer, writing both in Irish and in English. And a lot of her poems explore how the past makes itself felt within the present. And this poem is called False Friends. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Irish language. Here she plays with words from the Irish language. For example, it starts off, the Irish for history is star. Now, star, we know what star means in English. In Irish, we pronounce it star. Star na Héireann is the history of Ireland. To teach somebody is, the verb is egmunu. Tá mise egmunu an seo. Tá mise múnchor. So the word moon, you can hear it in the Irish verb to teach. A light is los. Los an sailse means turn on the light. And the Irish word for a secret is rune. Tó rúnagam, I have a secret. So she's playing around with these Irish words in this poem, False Friends. The Irish for history is star. The Irish for teach is moon. The Irish for light is loss. The Irish for secret is ruin. Perhaps this is why night skies catch our eye, luring us to learn by what light still shines. The next poet I'm going to introduce you to is Stephen Sexton, and he's a relatively new poet to the Irish scene. He lives in Belfast, where he teaches at the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry. And his first book, If All the World and Love Were Young, won the Forward Prize for the Best First Collection in 2019. And I'm going to read you this poem called A Talent. And again, he's talking about a visit to the fortune teller. A Talent by Stephen Sexton. Of two minds where to go for dinner, we darkened the door of the fortune teller. The table, draped with satin, was set for three. I thought of the unfinished game of draughts we waltzed through heroically that afternoon, and longed not to know how it would end. Candles burned on the shelves. Dust conspired among the curios, a horse's foot, a rabbit's shoe. She took our hands and read them simultaneously, and from them somehow divined what I was thinking. Who tells the fortune of the fortune teller? A sadness entered the room and introduced itself. I propped a little mirror in front of her. She made not head nor tail of her reflection, so we asked the fortune teller out to dinner. A man will come and he will hold a mirror, was all she cared to say. I thought of a green summer and the garden I grew up in, and as someone said, how nostalgia might be best remedied by pain and terror. The next poet, Jessica Traynor, is an award-winning poet, and she's a creative writer from Dublin. Her debut collection, Liffey Swim, was received with great acclaim in Ireland, and it's also been translated into Portuguese and published here in Brazil. We had the pleasure of receiving Jessica in the residence in Brasilia, which was actually the last public event that any embassy in Brasilia held before the pandemic struck. It was a wonderful evening with Jessica, and she read many of her beautiful poems and enthralled our audience here in the residence. And we do hope we get the chance to meet her again and to talk to her about the poetry that she is currently writing. And I'm predicting that she will have an amazing future in poetry circles in Ireland and further afield. And this is her poem, My Aunt Reads the Tarot cards. Not something I came across a great deal in my lifetime, but I do have friends who were who believed very strongly in tarot cards and learned how to read them themselves. So this is Jessica's poem, My Aunt Reads the Tarot. She frowns at my mother, fans the cards across our vinyl tablecloth. They make a sound like sighing, as if they have secrets too terrible to disclose. My aunt's face pauses in its reel of expressions, and we know her son is off his meds again, looking for gear in old haunts. In our steamed-up kitchen, my cards are always weeping women, snowbound churches, meetings on dark evenings with whispered messages. One birthday, she gives me the cards, wrapped in black silk, torn from a blouse, and they fall behind my bed among CDs, unread books. Years pass and they vanish. Our futures stay wrapped up in silk. The fool stands on my dresser, a young man waltzing towards the cliff edge. The next poem I'm going to read for you is by Paula Meehan. Now, Paula is a very well-established Irish poet and playwright. She was born in Dublin in 1955, but her poetry has been translated into languages including French and German, Greek, Estonian, Japanese, and of course Irish. She was awarded the Chair of Irish Poetry, Professor of Poetry by President Michael D. Higgins, and she was inducted into the Hennessy Hall of Fame for her achievements in poetry in Ireland. Her poem is called Well, and again, in Ireland, wells have a huge significance. Going to the well was very much part and parcel of growing up in Ireland during my granny's time and my mum's time, and even during my own. And we would always visit holy wells, and there are many different superstitions attached to wells in Ireland. So it's not unusual that we would have a poem such as Well included in our thoughts on It's Written in the Stars. Well, by Paula Meehan. I know this path by magic, not by sight. Behind me on the hillside, the cottage light is like a star that's gone astray. The moon is waning fast. Each blade of grass, a rune inscribed by hoarfrost. This path's well worn. I lug a bucket by bramble and blossoming blackthorn. I know this path by magic, not by sight. Next morning when I come home, quite unkempt, I cannot tell what happened at the well. You spurn my explanation of a sex spell cast by the spirit that guards the source that boils deep in the belly of the earth. Even when I show you what lies strewn in my bucket, a golden waning moon, 7 silver stars, our own porch light, your face at the window, staring into the dark. Our last poem from this selection today is by a poet called Ian Duhigg. And he's a poet born in London to Irish parents. And he says he's London Irish. And that's definitely how he thought of himself growing up. He was the 8th child in his family and the firstborn in England where they moved so that his father could find work. His dad was actually in the Irish Army, but there was nothing for him in the 1950s in Tipperary. So like so many of the time, including my own family, the 50s were a really difficult time in Ireland, and many, many Irish emigrated to England, especially looking for work. And so Ian writes out of this experience of the Irish diaspora, and he too has got great recognition in England and has won many awards for his work. His poem is called Sight Unseen. Tea bags were the death of tasseographers. I consulted one of the last here at the fair. She offered me and Earl Grey or Darjeeling, saying their leaves are best for old eyes. While it was brewing, she shared biscuits and memories of the Second World War, reassuring wives, mothers, and daughters behind the blackouts of news and curtains. It was about comfort, even when the news turned out to be bad. Nobody ever came back to moan, "I only wish I'd suffered longer." Even when she knew, she said she'd lie. She told me not to dunk my shortbread, then to swirl my cup thrice withershins, left-handedly, turn it over and then back. She looked in, paused, and smiled kindly. So they're interesting poems, interesting to think about those beliefs, the way I guess they're dying out, but there's still a lot of them intermingled into our culture. I've never actually been to a fortune teller myself. Um, I'm not sure I would like to hear what's going to lie ahead. So I'm happy enough to take whatever is out there for me. My mum used to say to me when I was growing up, "What's for you won't go by you." So she is a great believer also in that we make our own fate, what we do. Will come back to us. She also believes that, in the adage, no good turn goes without being returned to you. So in her life, she always felt that, any good thing she did would be reciprocated, which I think is a good attitude. And that leads into our last little bit of music that we're going to end up with today. Sharon Shannon, she is a very well-known Irish musician, and she's best known for her work with the button accordion and for her fiddling and her fiddle technique. But she also plays the tin whistle and in the melodeon. And in 1991, her debut album, Sharon Shannon, was the best-selling album of traditional music ever released in Ireland. So she got together with this big band, which features Jack Marr and Carol Keogh, and they released this very poignant, reflective song, Written in the Stars, as part of the Irish Hospice Foundation. They had a drive last year called Time to Reflect, and it was to bring awareness about reflection and the Irish hospice movement. And so Sharon released the single and all the monies earned were going to the hospice. So I hope you've enjoyed our little foray into fate and what the future holds. And I hope that for all of you, the future will only hold good things. And enjoy this little piece of music now with Sharon and reflect on all the good times we've had and the fact that we've got through COVID and we are beginning again to hopefully see the good times ahead with more poets and more online events to help us through and to connect us through poetry. So I am going to leave you there, and I'm going to ask us to share that little bit of music with you. Please enjoy. I hope we have it lined up.
There's a lesson everyone must learn, and as tough as it may seem, there's no use swimming against the stream. Though we must journey apart, fate had it planned from the start. Let it be written in the stars. Nothing will ever keep us apart. You're still there in the places we would roam, and my heart will forever be your home. And I promise to always hold your hand as long as I can. Do you hear me?
Dear whomever, don't sad.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're having difficulty with that.
Just be thankful for everything we have. From your spirit in the sky, I'll say so long, but never goodbye. Though we must journey apart, fate had it planned from the start. Let it be written in the stars. Nothing will ever keep us apart.
Oh, I miss you and how it makes me sad, and I long for the happy.
Okay. I'm sorry to say that perhaps there is a problem in the transmission, Susan. The music is beautiful, so perhaps we can put the link to the and download the music for those who are interested to hear the whole music to share that with their friends. Thank you very much, Susan, for your readings. I love the choice that you have done for this session, and we hope that next month we will have a bit, of course, lots of poetry, but perhaps some of them from Joyce, as we are celebrating Bloomsday and 100 years of Ulysses. Thanks a lot, Susan.
You're welcome. I'm sure we will be able to do that, Laura.
Bye. See you next.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Next. Okay.